Welcome to another edition of the Influence Global podcast, and I have many amazing guests on my show, but this individual today is somebody I am so excited to have on my show today. Because I think I've got a personal connection with this community, and I'm so impressed by what Ivan has done over his career. So welcome Dr. Ivan Misner, who is the founder of the BNI global networking community.
Well, thank you, Gordon. I appreciate it. And it's great to be on your show.
Lovely. Thank you. So let's just, for those people that don't know about BNI, and there can't be many because you've been going around since 1985. Is that right?
Yeah, I started in January 1985.
Wow. So this is all about you and your journey and what, and how important networking is in the sort of influencer and modern day business world. So let's just sort of roll back and tell us a little bit about why you set up BNI. What was the reason behind it?
Well, I got most of my business through referrals, and I put together a small group of people that I trusted. I hope they trusted me. And I'd like to tell you I had this vision of an international organization, but I just wanted some referrals.
Yeah.
And I was a young man, 28 years old. I had started a consulting business about a year and a half earlier. I needed referrals. I thought my friends probably needed referrals. We got together. We took one person per profession from the very beginning, one per professional classification. And someone came, and by the way, the reason I set it up was that I had gone to a lot of networking organizations before I started BNI. And, some of them were just totally mercenary. Everyone was trying to sell to me. I'd leave those meetings and I felt like I'd been slimed and I needed a shower. And then I'd go to these other groups it was happy hour and hors d'oeuvres. Nobody was doing any business. Now, I didn't like any of those. So I started this one group that my idea was that it would have a focus on business, but not mercenary. And that it would be relational, not social. And the glue that would hold it together is this principal core value of givers gain. This idea that if I help you, you'll help me. I'll do better as a result of it. So someone came who couldn't join because her classification was represented. And she said, would you help me open up a second chapter? And Gordon, I actually told her no. I said, no, this isn't what I do. I'm a business consultant. She said, well, this is kind of consulting. You're helping me build my business. Okay, fine. And so I opened the second one, and people came and asked me if I'd open up another and another and another. And at the end of the year, we had 20. We had 20 groups.
Oh my goodness! Wow. And this was
in
1985.
1985, yeah. By December of 85, we had 20, and that's when I had my Brody moment. Okay, you remember the movie Jaws?
Yes, of course.
Sheriff Brody at the end of the movie. The shark comes out of the water for the first time, and he's standing right there, and it comes out of the water. And he turns around, he walks over to the captain, and he says, you're going to need a bigger boat.
That's right, of course.
And so it was in December, and I didn't even try, and I had 20 groups. I even said no, and I had 20 groups.
Actually, you've just given me a great idea. I'm going to call the podcast "You Need a Bigger Boat."
You need a bigger boat. And so that's the point at which I realized I needed a bigger boat. That this was going to be something that would scale, that it was something that people didn't know, didn't have the opportunity to do, that we weren't teaching this in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. And as a matter of fact, one of the studies that BNI did, one of the surveys that BNI did on a BNI online vote was to ask people if they've ever had a college course that just covered the subject of networking, not a course about networking, but that just covered the subject of networking. And 87% of several thousand respondents, let me say, I don't remember how many respondents, there was 2,340 respondents, 87% said no, they'd never had a class that talked about networking.
Goodness.
How could that be?
Yeah.
It's, I did a part of another book on gender and networking, and we asked 12,000 people, has networking played a role in your success? 91% said yes. Out of 12,000 people all over the world, not just BNI members. 91% said yes. 87% said they've never had a class on it. And so it came to me that this was going to be way bigger because we're not teaching this in school.
Mhm. What I think is really fascinating, and having had my own experience of being a member, is there is a structure about it. And I think that is one of the things that has been so successful for you. And I know it's not for everybody, but actually, what I think is particularly good is the structure is bound is created success because it's
Yeah,
got structure.
come on. You want to be successful in business, you got to have systems and processes,
Of course you have.
structure.
Of course you have.
People sometimes do complain. Well, we've got rules. Look, hockey without rules would be boxing on ice.
I love
You,
it. Boxing
you got to
on.
have rules.
Yeah.
The thing is that you apply the rules more like Mandela than Attila. You gotta apply the rules with tough love.
Yeah.
That you care about people's success. But if you really want to be successful, you got to follow systems and processes.
And so what are the principal rules, again, for people that perhaps don't know enough about or haven't been to a BNI meeting? Tell us a little bit about some of those and which are the ones that have been successful particularly?
Yeah, well, we have meetings that are weekly. Now, after COVID, we have three types of meetings. We have 100% in person. Now that COVID is, winding down.
Yeah.
We have some groups who meet in person again, because prior to this, all of our chapters met in person. So we flipped very quickly to 100% online.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some chapters that are still meeting online exclusively. We have some chapters that are meeting in person again exclusively. We have a third, which I really like the concept, a hybrid chapter. They're meeting online 3 times a month and 1 time a month in person. I love that.
Yeah.
It's the best of both worlds to me. Now, I talk about the 3 because in any one of those 3, you got to show up. You have to be present at the meeting. So there's an attendance requirement.
Correct.
There's an expectation that you bring visitors or you bring referrals. There's not a mandate that you must bring referrals, but there is a mandate that you are engaged. And being engaged means, being active in the chapter. You have to go through member success program training. So there's an expectation that you attend an orientation and that you either bring referrals or you bring visitors. There are just a number. You have to do a weekly presentation of, it depends on the size of the chapter, 30 seconds to a minute, depending on the size of the chapter. And so there are a number of requirements. The biggest is the weekly meetings. You have to attend the weekly meetings. And if you miss too many, God bless you. We love you. You're a wonderful person. You can't be a member.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think also being able to send a substitute that represents your business was also quite a good idea. I don't know if that still exists, but it's certainly a way in which the whole is not empty. I think that's the principle of it. If you want the structure, somebody somewhere is representing your business and still able to pass referrals and give them.
Yeah, and we still have that program. It can be abused, and so it's sometimes members will just pull somebody off the street practically and say, "Hey, would you substitute for me?" That was never the intention. The intention was it's somebody who knows you, trusts you, respects you, and can speak on your behalf.
Absolutely.
And if it's done right, the substitute program is a lifesaver for people that travel.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things, because I'm involved in a lot of communities, is reward and recognition. And when people give up their time and they are rewarded for that in their peer group, it can be a very powerful way to keep them engaged and help them deliver more, but as well as their own personal development. How important do you think reward and recognition is within BNI and the wider networking communities?
Well, it's one of our 7 core values, recognition. It's very important that you recognize people who are there helping each other. And so, as you very well know, we recognize people who bring in the most visitors in a month. We recognize people who bring in the most referrals in a month. And we have many other forms of recognition depending on the region of BNI. We recognize people that are in the green. So we have a traffic light system based on your engagement. I don't know how long ago you were in, but a traffic light system where if you are doing all of the things that are necessary for you to be successful, you're in the green. And then we have yellow, red, and gray. Gray is bad.
Right, gray is bad.
Gray is very bad. But what we try to do is to recognize those people that are in the green, because it's not easy to do all the things necessary to be successful in a networking organization. And those people who do, we like to recognize them.
Yeah. The other thing I think is really important in networking is collaboration,
Yeah.
where somebody somewhere is not necessarily giving somebody a piece of business, but actually going after something together to try and win a piece of business. Because I think that, again, in sort of influencer community, the word collaboration is core. Brand and influencer work really well together. So again, in the business world is when people are working collectively together
Yes.
for a common aim.
Yeah, I'm actually, I just finished the manuscript for a book on related to this topic. It's called The Third Paradigm. The first paradigm of business is competition. The second paradigm was cooperation. And the third paradigm is co-creation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Co-creation is sort of a collaboration on steroids. It is working together to create something together. And I think BNI has been a really good example of a co-creative approach. Our philosophy of giver's gain really supports that. And you mentioned it, and I'm now talking about it. So let me just describe it in very briefly. To me, giver's gain is more than a phrase. It's a way of living one's life. It's a perspective to view and interact with the world. It's an attitude, not an expectation. And when it's applied properly, it'll change your life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world. And that's what BNI is doing. We're helping change the world in the way we do business.
Yeah, I love the motto, and even though I'm not directly involved with BNI personally, it has served me well. I use it consistently now as a great vehicle to engage with people on a professional level, but also on a social level as well. If you're giving your time to somebody, even at an event, or I think you want to be seen as that nice person, that go-to person that can help and support people, because if you do those things, I always say a brand is what somebody says about you when you're not in the room. So
that's a very good way of putting it. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So
and giver's gain doesn't have to be just about giving referrals, which is what I think you were implying. It can be about giving support and help in other ways, advice. So there are a number of ways that this concept of giver's gain works. Now, sometimes, particularly naysayers or people who feel it's too Pollyanna, say, yeah, but people will abuse it. Yeah, people will abuse it. This is why we have discernment. One must have discernment. And I wrote a book called Infinite Giving, which is about the 7 principles of giver's gain. And one of them is that to be an infinite giver, you don't have to be an infinite victim. And so at some point, when you have somebody who's just a taker, you got to say, okay, this philosophy, which I love, isn't going to work with this person.
Correct.
That's discernment.
Correct.
And you then build a relationship with somebody who is willing to have some kind of reciprocal relationship with this philosophy of giver's gain.
Yeah. Now, fantastic, great stuff. And I know this is just one of the 27 books that you've written, so which is very amazing to somebody that's written just one book. So let's talk about the networking environment, because I think for some people they are still overwhelmed with the going into a room and meeting a whole bunch of strangers for the first time. What would your advice be to help people, be more comfortable about what I would call the approach of a stranger?
So what happens is oftentimes people get right into talking about techniques. And the truth is you have to start with mindset. The mindset helps you work through the technique. So let me begin with what I think is the most important mindset, and then if you want, we can talk a little bit about technique. But to me, the most important mindset is this concept that I wrote about years ago called VCP: visibility, credibility, profitability. First, you have to have visibility. People have to know who you are, and so you start with being visible in the community. Then you move to credibility, and that's the one that takes time. Credibility takes a fair amount of time. So, first you have to be visible in the community, then you have to establish credibility. And credibility is where people know who you are and they know what you do. They know you're good at it. And that's why it takes time. Then and only then can you move to profitability, where people know who you are, they know what you do, they know you're good at it, and they're willing to have a reciprocal relationship with you. Referral relationship in framework of VCP, because it's about referrals. So it's a process. By the way, it's not a formula. It's a process. V plus C does not necessarily equal P. You can have visibility and profitability and not get to visibility and credibility and not get to profitability.
Yeah,
it's a process. You move from one to the next, to the next, to the next. Where networking goes wrong is when people use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. Hi, Gordon. My name's Ivan. Let's do business. And they jump over visibility, they jump over credibility, and they try to get right to profitability. Exactly. And in one of my books, by the way, we call this premature solicitation, which you don't want to say fast 3 times. And so when you go in, so people say, then why go if you don't go to a networking meeting to sell? Okay, you don't use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. And people then, well, why go to a networking meeting if you're not there to sell? You go there to work your way through the VCP process.
Yeah.
So when you're meeting people who have never met you before, you're just at visibility. Start the process of getting to know them. If you meet people that you've met before, but you haven't really built a relationship, now you're working on credibility. You meet people that you have a good relationship with and you're on credibility, now's the opportunity to see if you can move that profitability. So you go to networking events to work your way through the VCP process. Now, technique, it really depends on who you're meeting and where they stand in that VCP process. When you meet someone for the first time, this is where you have an opportunity to learn more about them. And here I say a good networker has 2 ears and 1 mouth and should use them both proportionally.
Yes, I use that phrase too.
you gotta ask them questions and get them to open up. People love to talk about what they do. Get them to open up and talk about who they are and what they do. With people that you've already met, then you want to go a little bit deeper to build that credibility with them. And then the people that you're at profitability with, man, it's shorthand. You meet them, hey, how are you doing? Tell me about the projects you're working on. How can I help you with the projects that you're working on? They're different conversations depending on where the two of you are in the VCP process.
No, fascinating. And I agree. I mean, we've all seen them, haven't we? We've seen people that do it so badly. And you can almost see people, sort of handing out business cards, although they're flyers, here, this is who I am. And I'm thinking, straight away, they've done the reverse. So they've actually not actually done an introduction. You almost want to just rip the card up because it's almost, solicitation, isn't it? It's right in your face marketing.
Yeah.
It's very
and the ones that drive me nuts are the ones that give me like 2 or 3 copies. I'm meeting them for the first time. They give me 2 or 3 copies of the business card and say, maybe you could give one to someone refer me. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Are you joking?
What was your name again? I'm sorry. To me, that is unbelievable, and it's certainly not a great way to network. One of my books, Networking Like a Pro, my co-author Brian Hilliard, he's got this great story. He's got this dog, beautiful lab named Brandy, and he said, look, if that worked, just walking around throwing up business cards at everybody, if that worked, what I would do is put a little saddle on Brandy. Everybody loves Brandy. I put a little saddle on Brandy, and on one side I'd have pockets on both sides, and on one side I'd say, put your card here, and on the other side I would say, take a card here, and I'd put in all of my cards. And he said, if that worked, I'd just bring Brandy to a meeting, send her loose, and everybody would go up to her, pat her, they'd take a card, they'd leave a card, and Brandy would come back and I'd have a stack of cards. So what? How is that going to help me? How is that going to help them? It's not. And it's so obvious when you describe it to people, yet people do that. Maybe not with Brandy, but they do it face to face.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, isn't it, to hear we talk about this. And I mean, networking's been going on for years. But what I'd love to know is what do you think is changing now with technology? What do you think is making a real difference in them? And there's apps, for example, where I mean, you and I have both been to exhibitions and conferences where we may not have known who's in the room. So let's just say we've got a conference and there's 500 people in the room. You could, your prize opportune client or partnership could well be in the room, but you just don't know that. Now, one of
Yeah,
the benefits of technology, of course, has helped us understand maybe who else is in that room and think, oh, right,
right.
right, that's really helpful. So
Amazingly helpful.
what's your thoughts around tech in the sort of networking environment?
So in 2018, Gordon, I wrote an article that was published by Entrepreneur on entrepreneur.com. I forget the exact title, but it's basically the future of face-to-face is online. And when I wrote that, my organization was like, OMG, no, the old man's losing it. What is he thinking? We're an in-person organization. And you know what? I didn't put this in the article. I had it in another article, but my thought was that BNI was going to be disrupted. That networking was going to be disrupted by technology. And it's happened over and over and over again in the world. I mean, one of my favorites is Kodak. Kodak, the film company, they invented the digital camera.
Yeah.
They had the patent on the digital camera. One of the senior executives for Kodak wrote a memo that said, let's license this out because we don't want to interfere with our film business. Besides, who's going to ever look at photographs on a computer?
Yeah, I know. I know. I know.
Now, Kodak could be, I mean, think about it. Kodak could be Apple.
Yeah.
It could be Apple. Had they taken that technology and used it in the way that Apple used it, and you got to remember, Apple wasn't a phone company.
No.
They were a computer company, and they
course they
weren't
were.
a camera company. They went from being a computer company to a phone company to a phone with a camera, a really good camera.
Yeah.
And so Kodak could have done the same thing. And instead, they went bankrupt because they didn't have the vision to see the disruption. And I believe that you are either, as a business, you are either going to be disrupted by technology or you are going to lead the disruption.
Yeah.
And so I started talking about this in 2018, and my organization thought I was crazy. 2020 hit.
Yeah, I know.
We had, at the time, in 2020, we had 9,600 chapters. We've opened 1,200 chapters in the last 2 years. But in the beginning of 2020, the organization, most of which was like, that's a really silly idea, is now thinking, that might not be such a bad idea. We saved the company, and I got to be honest, it was the CEO of BNI, Graham Weimiller, who had the foresight of seeing how serious this would be. We transitioned over to Zoom almost overnight. I mean, within weeks, we had thousands of chapters transitioned to Zoom. So technology is powerful, but don't let it disrupt you. Instead, you have to lead the disruption. I see the future of networking using apps like you're talking about. I see it, using things like Zoom. I see holographic imaging and the metaverse as the future of networking. And so I want BNI to lead this disruption. And people think, well, come on, you're a face-to-face networking organization. No. Yes, we were. Now we're a platform. But we've always embraced technology. I mean, think about it. What's our domain name? BNI.com. You have to be an early adopter to have gotten a 3-letter .com name. BNI has always been an early adopter with technology.
Yeah. Well, wow. I mean, it just proves that you've got to constantly be that innovator, haven't you? Be the disruptor rather than the disrupted. And there are many examples during the pandemic of companies that never thought that it would last as long as it will. Oh, this will blow over. How many times have you heard that expression? Oh, this will blow over. Particularly even in the association and membership communities, many associations felt, oh, this will. It won't be long now. We'll just put our conference and our events back a few months, and then it was back a few and back a few, and it was, oh my God, this is big, this is serious.
Well, those people who really did their research early on realized it was going to last at least a year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Graham, whose wife is a medical doctor, was introduced to people who were in the know, and medical professionals were saying back in January of 2020, no, this is going to last at least a year. It could go two.
Yeah.
And we were prepared for a year. The second year, that we, like everyone, that was hard. But we weren't shocked that it went 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, I work quite a lot, as you know, in the influencer space. So a lot of these very talented young influencers in particular have phenomenal audiences and engagement, and yet, ironically, are quite happy to be behind their cameras. And I've met some of them face to face, and we were talking a little bit about people that are shy. Sometimes you find people that are great in front of a camera, that are quite shy in public. And then you also find people that are the reverse, people that actually are great face to face, but then when the red light goes on, it's like,
Yeah, you're in headlights.
yeah, yeah. It's so how do we embrace young people within your organization, and the young entrepreneurs of tomorrow? Where do they go?
Well, I hear this a lot. As a matter of fact, I just spoke to a group of BNI people yesterday, and they said we want more, people in their 20s. And I said it's good to really pursue young people into a network. Absolutely. And when I started BNI in 1985, I was the youngest member of my chapter. I was 28.
Yeah.
And after a year, and we had 20 chapters, there were maybe less than 10 people my age. So my point is, nothing's changed in terms of that. And so what I started thinking, why is that? Well, the reason that, there was one study done at St. Thomas University about BNI, and the age was a perfect bell curve. And this is 20 years ago. In the 20s, very low, 30s, a fair amount, 40s, most of the members, 50s, 60s, and beyond. So like a perfect bell curve. That hasn't changed in 20 years. It hasn't changed in 37. So why? Here's why I think. First of all, young people, they go to college, they get out around 21, 22. How many 22-year-olds do you know who start their own company? Now, there are people who do it, no question. But as a percentage of the population, how many 22-year-olds do you see starting their own company versus 32-year-olds?
Yeah.
What happens is people kids get out into the real world, they get a job. They're getting experience, they're getting work experience. Even if they get into sales, the companies aren't teaching them networking. No. So they say, cold call, go to networks and cold call, whatever. And so you see a lot of people starting to become entrepreneurs in their late 20s, 30s, even 40s. And so I don't see that changing much in terms of participation in networking. Now, a lot of people think that the young people don't know how to network. Honestly, I think in some ways they're better than we were as at their age, because they know how to network online.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
They're good at it. We didn't even have that. And so I have a lot of belief in.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been fascinated is they love their tribes. They're very tribal, particularly in the gaming industry, for example.
Yep.
Disrupt. There's a whole load of different technology platforms which are almost tailored to that groups, and I think that's quite interesting to see that.
They just need to learn how to network face to face, which, oh, by the way, we did too.
Yeah, of course.
We had to learn it. When I was in my 20s, I was method acting my way through the networking process.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm still in touch with many of those people even today, all these years later. So it's not just about business acquaintances. It's actually about creating real powerful relationships and being that connector. So you did talk about the metaverse just briefly there, which is something that's also close to my heart as well. Where do you see the future in relation to networking and the metaverse?
The metaverse. Look, I think, people laughed when I first said it in 2018, but this was in my article back in 2018. I think that within 10 years, we're going to have technologies that will be holographic, like involving the metaverse. Our bandwidths continue to go up, and as crazy as it sounds, we may have some variation. It may not be exactly the same, but some variation of. Think of Star Wars, right?
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
had a Jedi Knight, a real Jedi Knight, and then a couple of holographic images of a Jedi Knight, and then there was a real Jedi Knight. And
There's
I
Ivan.
honestly,
There's
I
Ivan. There
think,
he is. There he is,
well,
flying
look,
through.
so if we ever get to that point, I want to be Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh dear, that's great.
So,
That's
I
great.
think that's the future. I think
Yeah,
the future is having holographic meetings
yeah. No,
because
I
the
think so.
technology is advancing at such a rate
Yeah.
that, and by the way, I'm not the only person that thinks this. There are a lot of tech experts that think within 10 years, we're going to have a lot of
Mm.
technologies, not maybe quite the
What
same as Star Wars,
do you,
but
do you think though during the pandemic we advanced maybe 10 years in terms of
yes,
technology? Don't you think? I mean, now Zoom is not just a product; it's
right,
are we having a Zoom meet? A Zoom?
right.
It's become a Google equivalent, isn't it? And they've because they got in fast, they scaled, and they made the tools really easily accessible. I think some of the technology has been lost on its overcomplication, particularly
Yeah.
for people that aren't necessarily tech savvy. And I think that's where Zoom did so well in becoming that simplified process, and so
They
on.
were well placed because they existed for a few years before that, but
Correct.
clearly, once COVID hit, they became the platform of
Yeah,
choice.
yeah. I never invested in Zoom. I never had any
I
shares in
did,
Zoom. Did you?
and they're not. They haven't done as well as you might think.
Yeah.
Um, they, I invested about a year before COVID,
Did you?
because yeah, about a year before COVID, and the stock skyrocketed.
Oh my God.
It has now dropped like a rock,
Yeah.
but it'll come back.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
technology will come back, but it's actually down. It was below. It's now below what I bought it for.
Did you sell out? Did you se- did
No,
you
I didn't sell. I
no.
tend to buy and hold stock.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes
Occasionally, I'll sell when I
yeah,
sometime when I'm concerned about the future of the company. I might sell,
yeah.
but Zoom, I'm going to hang on to.
Yeah, no, great. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Ivan. And I'm so pleased that we could talk for ages and well done on the success of BNI. It's a truly magnificent organization and you should be really proud of what you and your team have achieved. And thank you for sharing your insights on networking. And I think, your vision in 2018 has proven so important in terms of where you think this community is going to go. So thank you
And I
once
leave you
again.
with one last thought.
Yes, please. Your final
The
and where
expression,
people can find you as well, by the way.
yeah, sure. People can find me at ivanmeisner.com, Misner, ivanmeisner.com. I've been blogging for 15 years. I've got literally thousands of posts, all free content up there. So ivanmeisner.com. And of course, anyone who's interested in BNI, 76 countries, so it can direct you to a country you're in.
Great.
So the last thing I'd like to leave you with is an old phrase. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Familiar with that, of course, Gordon, yeah?
I am.
I disagree with it. I don't think it's what you know or who you know that counts. It's how well you know each other that really matters.
Yeah.
I have some amazing people in my phone, my contact list. Question is not who's in my contact list, but who could I call and they would take my call. And if I asked for a favor, would they do me the favor?
Mm.
It's not who you know, it's how well you know them that really counts. And that's why networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. It's about cultivating relationships with other business professionals. And when you get that, you're going to be good at networking.
Yeah. Brilliant. Fantastic. Really great way to end this. Thanks again, Ivan, for your time today.
My pleasure, Gordon, anytime.
That's it for another edition of Influence. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and give me your feedback, Gordon at gordonglenister.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, where you can also ask me a question. If you're able to give us a 5-star review, we really do appreciate it. And also, if you want help in creating an influencer marketing strategy, or you want to join the influencer marketing roundtable event, which we host every Wednesday morning on Zoom, then head over to gordonglenister.com where you can find out more about the details. And if you want to find out more about our shows and many others, go over to the MPN, the Marketing Podcast Network, and you can find them all there. Thanks as always to my producer Neil Whiteside from Freedom One. And until next time, from me, Gordon Glenister, it's bye for now.